Let's take a look at the rear suspension on the 2007 Cayman S. The rear suspension is a spring wrapped around the shock or damper or whatever you call it in your part of the world. And it has a fixed plate at the bottom, so the verticality is fixed. If you were to go with a coilover suspension, this plate would be replaced with something that had threads and an adjustment up and down, which would allow you to more precisely corner balance the car. All things being equal, with this fixed design, the corner balance should be pretty good. When I get all done and everything's settled in, I'll throw it on the scales and just see how close it came. So you buy a brand new strut, and it comes in everything that's in black up to this shiny part right here, you get as a package. And just like on the front, you disconnect it up at the top, it drops down out of the hole, and you disconnect the rear anti-sway bar link, and that pulls a long bolt that goes through a fixture on the back side of the strut. And in many cases, just the weight of the wheel carrier will start to drop it out of the strut. But you may have to spray a little solvent in there. But basically, the black part comes out of the aluminum part. So again, that's the problem, is you got to lower it enough to clear the body. And I've watched some videos. I'm about convinced that the easiest way to do this is to disconnect this body bolt and this body nut stud and drop, this is all one piece, drop that down. Now what I did, because I've got a lift, is I just took my plastic table and I slid it up underneath here, and I lowered the car until this stuff was just a short distance, so that when it fell, it didn't have far to go. The problem in the back one is you've got a hard line cable for the parking brake. So you can't totally take it apart without disconnecting that, and that's something I'd rather not do. So I just dropped it onto the table. I disconnected this, had to disconnect this trailing arm, but eventually it fell down far enough that I could clear this out, pull the strut, take it to the shop, put it in a vise, use my spring compressors, compress the spring, get the old parts out, compress it, and then put the new parts in and bring it out here. Nothing too earth-shattering on that part, but as long as I've got it open here, and before I put the engine back in, I thought I'd just show a few key components of the suspension. So the suspension articulates up and down by rotating about this fixed end here and then through a ball joint right there. This track rod, get back far enough you can see the whole thing, articulates up and down. It's got its own ball joint, and that controls the toe setting. So when you get a four-wheel alignment, what they're going to do is shorten or lengthen that track rod to rotate the wheel carrier and change the toe. So the way that it is done with Porsche is there's an eccentric washer. You're not seeing things. That bolt is not centered in that washer. And by rotating the eccentric washer, you can push this link in and out. And you can adjust your toe pretty finely by doing that. So this carrier drops down from the overhead, and that adjusts the toe. Now the camber is adjusted in a similar fashion. There's another eccentric bolt, and the lower control arm goes in and out by rotating that eccentric washer. And it's the same principle. As you make it in and out, it's going to adjust the camber because it's going to rotate in and out. So those are, when you get a four-wheel alignment, those are two things they're going to attack. Caster, in this sense, is fixed, pretty much fixed. So there's a trailing arm that goes up through here. And just like a lot of suspensions, that is fixed at the body end, but it rotates. And as the suspension moves up and down, this takes the longitudinal forces. The vertical forces are taken by the strut, the springs, and then the lateral forces are taken by basically a parallelogram going through here like this. Now, since I had the engine out, man, there was no better time to change what is not a motor mount, it's a transmission mount. So this bracket and this bracket are going to attach to each side of the transaxle. And for some crazy reason, Porsche wants to sell you that whole assembly with the bracket for way too much money. But I found a, I believe it's RM European in Littleton, Colorado, sold just the part that wears out, which is the shiny aluminum part you see up there. So I replaced that while I was in here. I guess you could do it with the transaxle installed and supported independently. That big fat nut there, it's not easy to get out. This was the time to do it. I had the engine out. It was the time to do it. And so those are done. And then obviously here's your half shafts. They're dangling down, ready to accept the engine, which should go in the next day or two. So I'm excited about that. So that's your rear suspension on the Cayman. There's another better view of the trailing arm going up through there. And the coolant pipes, you take the air conditioner compressor and just leave the lines intact and set it up in there. Air mass meter is left in place. So yeah, that's about it. Oh, this is the connection for the clutch hydraulics. And I think that's about it. By the way, this arrangement, as it presently sits, may look incredibly flimsy. You might say, man, there's only 2 bolts holding that thing in. So if you see 2 bolts there, another 2 bolts there, this is all going to be beefed up substantially with this pile of parts that I've got waiting over here. I don't have them set out, but you can kind of see there's going to be a metal plate and a big heavy fixture, and I believe what they kind of maybe call some X-brace, it's not X-bracing, but there's definitely 3 or 4 different pieces are going to go in. They're going to stiffen all that up and make a nice strong box out of it. So at that point it becomes really strong. As a matter of fact, Porsche cautions you, once you pull these parts off the car, you should not be sitting on the wheels. It is not stable from a standpoint of doing much of anything. So you want to, at this point, again, if you're setting up to do work on a lift, that's great. If you're working off of jack stands or something, set your jack stands so that they are not using the suspension at all, that they use the jacking points under the car, because at some point you're going to have to take all that stuff off. You're going to lose the stability of the suspension, and you just can't have that. Something will bend over and break. Those 2 bolts are not enough. So yeah. Here's the 2 strut units that I took out of the front suspension. And you can see there's a bracket, and right in there, the bolt for the anti-sway drop link goes through there. That holds it. It's not I think once you tighten everything down, that bracket is just to get you into an initial position. It's clamped more securely by other means, but you do have to have that lined up to get the bolt from the sway bar drop link through there, and then that'll hold it until you get it clamped into final position.